Welcome to the Pull Bag. Join us as we dig out our latest comics and discuss them with the rotating panel of the GCRN crew. So sit back and enjoy this week's Pull Bag.
Hello and welcome to the Pull Bag. This is episode 381. I'm, of course, TFG1Mike. Joining me in this Origins episode is Mr. Jeremy Fein. Hello, sir.
Hello, sir. Good to be back.
Good to be back, and it's good that we're not using GarageBand on your end because it made you sound like a mouse.
That's good.
Yeah. The Pull Bag is kind of not really back. It's whenever I can get people to record for me, hence why the record monkey is here. And for a while, hopefully I can get several of my podcasting friends to come on here who enjoy comics that can, do all the recording work for me, and I can ask them the new and improved 25 questions for the Pull Bag Origins. Starting out, did you grow up reading comics? At what age did you first remember reading or noticing comics?
Okay, this had to be between ages 6 and 7, and when I first remember reading comics and noticing comics. So, yes, definitely grew up reading them.
As a kid, was there a parent, a friend, or someone who just said, "Here, kid, read this comic and go away, you bother me"? Like, who turned you on to comic books as a kid?
It's odd because I was walking home from school with my mother. I was in the first grade, and I was talking about Batman 66 because it was airing a lot on WPIX Channel 11 in New York City. Mm-hmm. And this kid just happened to pass by and over here, and he started to tell me about all these other different comics, and he knew I was too young for Batman, but he was trying to introduce me to Spider-Ham, which is pretty much the satire, and I got hooked on that. But he was trying to show me another comic about rats, and I can't remember what it was. But he never said, "Go away, kid." In fact, nobody's ever said, "Go away, kid, you bother me." They, as I got older, it's like, read this and read that. But it was never like, But it was definitely a complete stranger at the time. I shouldn't talk to strangers, but this guy was okay.
Very cool, very cool. Yeah, I phrase that question that way because sometimes in some people's cases, their parents would say, "Oh, here's a comic. Go read your comic and, stop bothering me for dinner or stop bothering me for a snack," or, that kind of thing. When you were a kid, which characters were your favorites?
Well, between 6 and 7, it was Spider-Ham for some reason. But when I got older, it was actually from the horror comics, the Crypt Keeper, the Old Witch, and the Vault Keeper from the Tales from the Crypt reprints. Because some kids in my neighborhood had HBO and some didn't, and I was one of the kids that didn't have HBO. So when I heard about the TV show and I go over to the house to watch it and I found out they were the comics, I got to go and started to read Tales from the Crypt before I was reading DC or Marvel because I just was a horror guru. So I loved their wit, I loved their design, and I love the stories they told.
Very cool, very cool. Yeah, I'm not a horror guy. I never have been. I blame Robert Englund. It's all his fault. Scared the crap out of me at 6 years old in that first Nightmare movie, and I'm like, nope, not. I respect it, but nope, not for me.
Oh, I hear you. Yeah.
An age-old question: DC or Marvel or both?
We've had this discussion off, and on, but I have to go with DC more because I have a degree in social science. So being the Batman fan, and even with Superman, with the philosophical aspects, Batman with the psychological aspects, same thing with Wonder Woman and with Green Lantern. It just was Marvel. I feel I got into Marvel after watching the MCU because you could take an anamorphic duck and give him adventures and it works, or you could just put somebody in a red and yellow suit and fight a dragon that's just made out of sounds and it works. But Marvel takes more chances, and DC can be a little bit more uptight, which is not a bad thing. But if you want something with more meat on the bone, I have to go with DC.
I like both from each of the companies. It depends. For me, it's always about characters. Depends on whether it's Batman, whether it's Batgirl, Nightwing, that kind of thing. I've never been one for team up books on really either side or anything like that. But all right, what other publishers do you enjoy reading? Stuff like IDW, Dark Horse, Dynamite, that kind of stuff.
IDW, I do enjoy because of the nostalgia purposes. I know I wasn't on the series where you were talking about, Popeye versus Mars Attacks, or, definitely they took the Mars Attacks and they did a lot better than Burton did in 1996. And I read, I had the trading cards for a while too. So, and I really liked what they did with Transformers. I liked what they did with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles meets the real Ghostbusters. I couldn't shut up about that one, because there was a reason why they crossed them over and why they put them together. And I really, 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 and if this is probably the definitive for me, IDW nailed it with Turtles.
Oh, they have, and they still are. Yeah, Turtles. Like I didn't grow up with the original Eastman and Laird books. I grew up starting with the original '87 animated series. But once and people who have listened to this show long enough know when my buddy Joe and I did our very first Turtles episode, when he told me to get the first trade, I was like, okay, I'll get it. I got it. They were all in red bandanas, and I'm like, oh God, please no. He's like, no, give it a shot. You'll like what they do. And I'm like, okay. I gave it a shot, and all these years later, we're still trying to play catch up at this point. The last thing we did for that was the Kingdom of Rats arc, which was issues 81 to 85. So we got some catching up to do on Turtles here in the show.
Yeah, the last thing I'm going to say, though, is that I got into the original Turtles after the first movie that came out in 1990. Somebody shoved that book in my face, but it was a reprint, not the original. So, yeah, if you get I know IDW has started to issue the reprints of the original series of Turtles, so they're easy to get now more than they were back then.
Yeah. Very much so. Print or digital, which one, both, either or, and why?
Yeah, we've had the discussion, I think, but here's the problem, though, with print. Over the years, if you don't take care of your comics, you don't have the right mylar, the right backing, the hold up, the boards to hold up the books and everything.
Yep.
After a while, paper will just start to turn yellow and disintegrate. I know a lot of people are collectors because they want everything signed and they want everything preserved. And you figure if digital, then you can just keep it on your iPad and then you can download it onto the cloud and blah, blah, blah. But turning the page and everything, looking at those ads from the 80s, like if you want to get that bike, call Janine. But nostalgia purposes and ads for movies and other comics and the editor, answering fans' questions, digital, I find it to be, if I'm in a doctor's office, my only problem is, again, if I get something signed, I'm not putting it on eBay because then I don't have it anymore. But
exactly.
But the only problem that I have is that I treat it like fine china because I have newspapers that my grandparents gave me from the 20s that they kept. And if you don't take good care of it, it falls apart. So it's a tough one. It really is. And I'm jumping through a lot of hoops. But I like both. But in today's age, I can understand that if you want to preserve paper and save some trees, digital, but for nostalgia purposes, print. So it's like 50-50.
There you go. That's cool. Who are some of your favorite comics writers and why?
Oh God! Well, we lost Danny O'Neill. I mean, that was a tough...
May he rest in peace.
Oh God! He, first of all, he helped the Bronze Age, and but New 52, I gotta go with Snyder, and I met Snyder, and not only did I meet Snyder, but he was the only person that I didn't have to pay $50 to shake his hand. He spoke to me, and as well as Amanda Carter and Jimmy Palante from Harley Quinn, because they were nice enough at a convention to say, if you want us to sign something, you have to buy a book. But if you want to talk, but Snyder, actually, I should take that back. Snyder, if you had your book with you, no charge. If you wanted to shake your hand, no charge. If anything, no charge. So Snyder is too cool for school for me, as well as Jimmy Carter definitely, and Amanda. But Danny, I never really got to meet, unfortunately. I would almost even go with Frank Miller, but unfortunately, over the years, and then there's Brian Posehn, who brought back a great run with Deadpool, as well as Greg Dugan. So, I mean, there are so many, unfortunately, but those are definitely, I know we're not doing top fives, but God, there are so many writers that were just like so underrated. But if I had to pick one right now, it breaks my heart, but I would go with Snyder. But yeah, I mean, Snyder helped New 52 in more ways than one.
Yep. What defines a good story to you?
Well, that's easy. It's the first act, the second act, and the third, but it also has to do a valid point. I mean, comics over the years, I finally got my hands on some Silver Age, and boy, they felt like insulting your intelligence, and I can understand with that Seduction of the Innocent book, but boy, they just, you could tell there were a lot of frustrated writers, but somehow there were some peanuts in those turds. And as for what makes a good story, is that if you have a balance of good and evil, and you have not being so repetitious, that you have it where, okay, if the villain and the hero at least have a respect for each other, or not so much of a cat and mouse, because that's really Catwoman and Batman, but if you have something like Riddler and Batman, where they both kind of respect each other because they both have to use their brains to fight, or if you have Bane, where it's brains and brawn versus Batman's brains and brawn, or Joker with his gadgets against Batman's gadgets, and a respect for each other, understanding for each other, and still reinventing the wheel with keeping it fresh over the years, then that's, to me, is pulling an effort and trying, and not just trying to make a quick buck. But it's hard for a superhero, not for any other story. You have to do something that I know is hard, that you haven't done before. I'm tired of origin stories, but somehow with Turtles and IDW, they created, in my opinion, the definitive origin story, which I'm not going to spoil if you don't know what it is. But I'm telling you, pick up that IDW Turtles, and that teaches you how to do an origin story. So, and also kind of a respect of hero and villain if it's not wearing a cape and cowl. So, yeah, that's definitely all I ask for.
Very true. What does a story have to draw you in? Like, what does, like, a solicitation have to say in order for you to be like, oh, I really want to read that series? Like, when DC Black Label first solicited Harley Quinn. Wasn't it Harley Quinn?
Probably.
Damn it, what is that called? What the hell is the damn thing called? I should know this by now. I don't know. Anyway.
Like Harleen?
Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah, when DC first solicited Harleen, I was trying to think of the stupid name, the actual name of the... Yeah. So basically, that's what the question is. What does a story have to draw you into it, to have you say, I'm going to add that to my digital bin?
Well, if it's sometimes it's the cover, but if it's word of mouth and you find out who the writer and the illustrator are, then it's like, shut up and take my money. If for example, when I found out that Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo were coming back because they never finished their Batman run, I was like, I'm down. So that's pretty much it. Harleen, or if you look at that book Joker, Smile, there's just something about it that draws me. Even something like Killing Joke, just to see how screwed up Joker can be. Because I didn't really know who Alan Moore was at the time, and that's another writer that's underrated. But it has to just deal with three things for me. It's either the cover, or it's got to be the writer / illustrator, or pretty much, if social media can be mature, word of mouth and wine, and not just having a sandbox about it. And you know what the sandbox is. I'm not going to get into that. But yeah, those are the three things for me. Harley Quinn, I mean, the original run, I think we talked about, I couldn't shut up about that run. But Harleen, yeah, we're going to save that for another time because that's a whole different conversation.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Who are some of your favorite comics artists?
Oh, God. Well, definitely Capullo from New 52. There were some illustrators I know. The name's on the tip of my tongue, but he was also the creator of Mad Magazine after Seduction of Innocent came and went, and he was working on the Tales from the Crypt and the EC run before that went kaput. He created Mad Magazine to like keep afloat, but again, there are so many. I have to go with Capullo because he really took cartoon characters, or I'm not going to say anything bad about what the other illustrators did over the years in the Bronze Age, but he really took something like Joker and with the face cut off and how he just took that stretchy face and death of the family and how he kept taking it off and stapling it back on him was just amazing. So I have to give creditors due. I have to just go with Capullo on this one. Just for that image alone.
Right, yeah. Do you have a favorite non-superhero title?
Yeah. I like to call Tales from the Crypt.
Very cool. What was your favorite run of a series?
God. For now, it's a... Oh, God. It would either be a tie between Marvel's Infinity Gauntlet or Batman Death of the Family.
Very cool. What is one comic you can read over and over again, single issue or trade?
Single issue or trade? Well, definitely for single issue, I would go with definitely the first issue of Batman Death of the Family, just because it drew me in. But trade, I'm actually going to go with something called Legends of the Dark Knight Going Sane.
Interesting. When did that come out?
94.
Ah, it's one of the old ones. Okay, very cool.
Yeah.
Are there comics now, folks, up to this point, these 13 questions, they've all kind of been positive. I've thrown a few negative ones in here, but not so. They're not all in here, but you got to throw some of these hard ones in here at some point. Are there comics you avoid altogether?
Yeah. Again, because if it comes down to the capes, and it comes down to DC and Marvel, I really try to get into Rebirth as much as I can, but it's I'm not I'm gonna put a pin on that one on why. As for Marvel now, the same thing, but non-capes, yeah, I've really tried. I know we talked about Image Comics for a while, and I really tried to defend them, but after a couple issues with some of them, except for Walking Dead, there were some that I had some hope for, and I was just getting really disappointed with what Image had become. I mean, I love Spawn, don't get me wrong. But yeah, Image kind of tripped over the finish line for a while. And so, non-cape-wise, just disappointed with them.
I'll say this: you should try "I Hate Fairyland" by Scotty Young.
I Hate Fairyland. Oh god, I know you were talking about that one. Yes, well,
yeah. Okay, so this kind of relates to which part of your answer was just there. So, are there any comics, past or currently, that you wish you hadn't read them?
I'm not gonna. Definitely not gonna bash I Hate Fairyland. That's an underrated. That's in a class by itself right now. But there was one. There was definitely one that I was reading when we were talking about Image. It had something to do with superheroes. It was something like, oh yeah, God Hates Superheroes. I think that's what it was from Image. It had an interesting idea and premise, and it was the closest thing I felt it was going to be to either satirizing DC's Doom Patrol or Mystery Men. But it just got so disappointing. And there was another one that just forgot the title, but it had to do with cryptozoology, where it was Bigfoot that teamed up with a human, and it was almost going to be like X-Files, and so much promise, and they just didn't know what to do with it.
Interesting. Weird. How large or small is your physical comic book collection?
I have lost count because it's literally locked up in a bin, because I'm going back to from the 80s to present, and I'm just afraid to touch it that it's going to dissipate. But I can tell you right now, I had boxes, man. So, yeah.
All right. What is the one comic you could never live without ever?
Well, it's not a caper cow, if you can believe it, but it was a really rare book that came out in '96. It was Charles Barkley versus Godzilla. And
really?
Yes, it was very. It's not worth anything now. It's rare, but it's only worth like in the double digits because it was just to advertise shoes, and they had those commercials. So somebody came out with a comic book, and the difference between the commercial and the comic was Barkley and Godzilla play basketball to promote the sneaker line. As for this comic, it's a kid that just is at a beach in, I think, California and sees Godzilla, and Charles Barkley is filming a commercial and just walks over to Charles Barkley and goes, "Fight Godzilla." And Barkley's like, "No," because, it's Godzilla. And somehow he becomes big, and they fight with a basketball. It's really bizarre, but it's something to hold in your collection if you're just a Godzilla fan, and it was the 90s, and that's pretty much what it was.
Very cool. Very cool. What was the most money you ever spent on a comic or a comic item?
Oh, God, this is a good one. Yeah, I probably spent the triple digits on a adaptation of Cool World because I was recording a podcast on Cool World, the movie, which I actually enjoyed because I'm a fan of Ralph Bakshi. But I found out that the adaptation was different from the movie because it had a different vision, and I had to read it, and wasn't disappointed, but it cost a lot of cheddar. But when I read it, it answered a lot of questions, so I have no regret about it.
Very cool, very cool. Was there ever a moment in your life when you were done with comics?
Yeah, I think it's a little-known movie called Batman and Robin. And I said, I can't wait to tell that story because that's a story I'm not going to repeat. I'm going to tell that once with a group of people, but it's interesting. I mean, it's 2020 and I still haven't finished that movie, but I'll go into why. But I just felt like writers, because of we talked about this too about the comic book crash, and unfortunately because of the comic book crash, because they were coming out with new covers for their comics. I mean, Bongo Comics was doing this with The Simpsons, and because they had one where a character would die on every page. They did this with Ren and Stimpy, where Powder Toast Man met Spider-Man, and they had some cool ideas, but they were kind of getting a little, long in the tooth, and it was just getting to be silly, and I just felt like the writers are just giving up, and the movies aren't doing that well, and Superman got killed just to sell a bunch of comic books, and was getting, what's the point? So I took a huge break until New 52 came out. So between 97 to 2011, when everything was like good in the world again, yeah. So that's a good timeline.
Interesting. What are you reading right now, and what do you think our listeners should check out?
Okay, this is easy. I know, Batman, but hear me out. Why? Actually, two things. I am reading Batman: The Last Night on Earth because it's Greg Capullo and Scott Snyder ending their run. But I'm also reading Scoopocalypse because after watching that god-awful Scoop movie, and I had to just get a palate cleanser and watch Pup Named Scooby-Doo and Mystery Incorporated and Guess Who Scooby-Doo, I came across that there was, he's a Warner Brothers character now. So DC decided, well, we'll put him in a universe where he's fighting zombies. And it's an interesting read, but I got a little disappointed because it feels like it's Night of the Living Dead meets Scooby-Doo. So it's okay, but I'd rather go with Batman: The Last Night on Earth because it's definitely, if this was a series finale, if this is something that the Nolanverse should have been or Snyder should have been, this is probably the definitive series finale that has nothing to do with the animated series. But boy, it is probably... it's like you need a cigarette when you're done. Like, was it good for you, baby? It's that. No, it really is. It's actually. I mean, I did go back and forth with Flashpoint because that's also an interesting read, but I have to go with Batman: Last Night on Earth.
Awesome. All right, this is a new question for guests: heroes, heroines, anti-heroes, heroines, or villains. What archetypes are your go-to reads?
I like the anti-heroes at this point with Harley Quinn because, my problem with Superman has always been nice guy, but, there's something odd about him. Batman is Batman. He has trust issues. Harley Quinn is in between, but she's also a little sarcastic. And when I read her, it's not a Betty and Veronica, but I also like the fact that she's acting like Robin Hood from now, from time to time. Like she'll go into a corrupt politician's house and tell some bad jokes while robbing him, but she'll give the money to people who deserve it. So I really, really appreciate what they do with her, with the anti-hero. But as for heroes, look, you can't go wrong with Batman because, he's the goddamn Batman. Heroines, I mean, I loved Wonder Woman in New 52. And as for villains, right now, anything that's individual trait of Joker, especially the Brian Azzaro that came out in 2008 before Dark Knight came out, that was a great read. And I really appreciate what they did with him, again, with Snyder. But, and Riddler, too. The only thing I'll say, though, with Rebirth, what Tom King kind of did with bringing back Kite Man, that was interesting. But that was, and now he's on the, the Harley Quinn show. But, I mean, villains at this point, it's really hard to create a better villain than between Joker and Riddler because of their history. But Bane, I guess you got to go back to, Bronze Age, especially with Nightfall, to see how good Bane really was and why he deserves a better writer than Tom King. But that's just me.
Do you have a parents got rid of my comics story? So was there any time in your life that your parents sold your comics that you were getting?
No, because they would pay for them and they were kind of yeah. Although they would secretly give away my collection in the 90s because they felt like, oh, I know this person's really sick and I figured this book would help cheer them up. And I was pissed because I was like, that's my Ren and Stimpy, man. And I'm, I know Ren and Stimpy, first of all, the show is different from the comic. They still tried to be silly, but they still had notes that they couldn't be too gross or, push the boundaries the way they did on Nickelodeon. But they were still getting away with a few things. And then I know this has nothing to do with anything, but they were still mad and cracked that they were satirizing Lion King, and it was a really good version for both how they were satirizing Lion King. So I was pissed off of it. Yeah.
Very cool, very cool. Yeah, that question is in there because of when I was a kid, my dad got rid of my He-Man toys at the time. So I figure, somebody must have my parents got rid of my comic book story at some point. What is one item from a comic book you'd love to have in the real world?
Oh, God. This is a good one. I'm simple. I really am. I would probably go with one of Joker's knives, because he just prefers knives to guns, because, knives just show the true person, and I just love how he cuts. So anything custom made that was held by Mr. J would be awesome by me. I would almost go with Penguin's umbrella, because I know why he used it back in the day, because he was hiding weapons in there, and then it just became a thing where he tricked out his umbrellas. But I mean, it's a tough call. It's between the two, but there's just something like holding a Joker knife would just be so cool for me.
For me, since this is a new question, and we've never had this question on the show before for Origins, since I revamped all these questions, and this question actually comes from my buddy Jesse Raz. So for me, I don't know. I mean, if, Green Lantern's ring was real, I think that would be really cool to have in the real world. I'm not sure I'm the best person to wield that power, but I don't know. Maybe probably one of one of Terry McGinnis's Batarangs. I would love to have that out of the comics. That would be really cool. If you could create any comic storyline, what would you want to create, and what characters would you want to create with it? So this one is basically, somehow magically you're hired by DC and you get the keys to the kingdom from whatever.
Oh, I would love to really work on a better Suicide Squad line, but I would do it my way, where I would just start over again, and I put in Harley, I would put in Shark, I would put in the Matt Hagen Clayface, probably put in Jason Todd, and I would just have it where they're not so much comedic villains, and Poison Ivy as well, because it's Harley, and but put them in where they're not so much comedic villains, but they're definitely anti-heroes, but they're not so much Justice League Dark or the Injustice League. But I would do a better job with Suicide Squad, because my only problem with I understand why Suicide Squad was created, but for them to have bombs in their neck and be controlled by Waller, I hate. So I would just have them be not so much Suicide Squad, but give them a better name, and just have them go out and just do the things that the Justice League doesn't want to do, but they're not corrupt, but they're still bending the rules. Right. And I know that's a little confusing, but it's kind of like when I read Harley Quinn, the Valentine special back in the day, where she, like I said, she goes to a corrupt politician and she's breaking his arms because she found out that he kept money from the good people of Gotham, and he keeps it underneath his floorboards and keeping it for himself. But she gives it back, and she does it in her own way. Or she goes and she finds out that this woman in a nursing home is being abused, so she does this home invasion of the family, and the neglected son is in the basement playing with the model train, so she's stepping on she's like, I'm Godzilla. Stuff like that. And I feel that if you have it with Ivy, because Ivy, she hates humans, but she can get along with Harley for some reason. And the Matt Hagen Clayface, I feel, is an underrated character, but he could be useful because he's a shapeshifter. King Shark is just... I feel like he's not so much DC's version of the Hulk or Groot, but I feel that he's an interesting character because he's a talking mutant shark, but there's just something enjoyable about him. And Jason Todd, I mean, he's the second Robin that just had this arrogance about him, and we've kind of seen an arrogant Batman known as Owlman in Earth 3 back in the 80s during Crisis on Infinite Earths, and we really haven't seen that since. So I kind of like to see, like, a Justice League that's a little more snarky, a little bit more arrogant, but a little bit more, not, showing the teeth and everything and the fake smile.
Well, that sounds interesting. All right, last question. What is the one piece of advice you would give the comics fandom?
The one piece of advice I give the comics fandom, oh God, definitely support your local comic book store. I know that the price of comics now are pretty much the price of a gallon of milk, or 2 loaves of bread, or gas is different all over the place, and $5 for a brand new comic is insane at this point. But there's still a lot of artists out there and writers that are trying, and some that are just like have gotten the keys to the kingdom, but I feel like they could try, but they don't really understand the craft. And Tom King, I'm sorry, but I'm looking at you. And then there are others that I feel that just had fun with putting Scooby-Doo with the zombie universe, or putting wacky races in a Mad Max universe. And then I feel that Stan Lee is up in heaven looking down, smiling about how Miles Morales is doing well in, Earth 616 in Marvel. And I feel that even with IDW, it's not just selling a comic of nostalgia. You have a lot of great stories. So they're still out there, and you don't have to be 6 years old or 96-year-old to appreciate a good story. I feel it, you're not my psychiatrist or anything, and I'm talking to you and all the listeners out there when I say psychiatrist, but I sometimes have problems paying attention. So and when I'm reading a story like this, it has to be visual. So that's what I love about comics and graphic novels, because it helps me visualize. I'm still using my imagination, don't get me wrong, but I feel that if you can bring me into a story and make it visual, it helps me. And I've known people over the years that were illiterate that comics helped them to, read because of the simple dialogue, which is not a bad thing. So it's not just for kids anymore. And the stories have gotten to a point, some good, some bad, and shops have good days and bad days. But I just have to say, I don't think this is a dying medium. I just feel that you have to take it with a grain of salt, and there is something for everybody, and there is one thing catered for you, and it doesn't just have to be about superheroes anymore or any less. So that's always a good thing.
Awesome. All right, where can the people find you online? You want to promote your podcast stuff, whatever you'd like to talk about for promotion, put that right here.
Well, Facebook right now, I have 3 group pages. I have the Podcasters Cafe, where anybody hosts a podcast or wants to advertise a podcast. You go on Facebook.com and you search for the Podcasters Cafe. We'll do the rest because I've been administrating, that page. Hunter Queen, my podcast has been on and off because I'm part of an accelerated nursing program that I'm finishing up by this fall. So that podcast, the archive should be back up and running again with some new episodes. Is doing a very soft reboot right now with that. That you'll find on Podbean, Hunter Queen, which is pretty much what I've done is treat it like, those trick-or-treat lantern things you get, you pull out something, you get candy corn, you get a rock, well, that's what you're going to do with Hunter Queen. Whatever you pull out, whatever comes to mind, could be a 10-minute episode, could be a 4-hour episode, could be about anything related to pop culture, sometimes horror-related, but it is going to be, since I have a degree in social science, psychological, and philosophical. And as for Twitter, I'm off of it for reasons, but you can find me over, like I said, for Facebook, Podbean, and hunnickfeedback@gmail.com.
Awesome. All right. That's going to do it for this new Origins episode. Thank you for joining us here inside the Pull Bag. If you'd like to get in contact with us or leave feedback for the show, there are several ways to do so. Visit the website, geekcastradio.com, where you can comment on all our other posts, as well as this one. Here are all the ways you can listen to us nowadays. You can find us on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, and, of course, the home where our files exist, Spreaker. Leave the show's feedback in iTunes. Please do this. Follow us on Twitter at GeekCastRadio, at The Pullbag. I am at TFG1Mike. Become a fan on Facebook. Go to facebook.com/GeekCastRadio Network and also check out The Pullbag on Facebook as well. For now, I am TFG1Mike with
Hunnick Outcast, no Ian Fein. That feels good.
Lord. As always, make your greatest game in the comics, and we will catch you next time.
You just heard the latest episode of The Pull Bag, GCRN's comic book review podcast. There are several ways to get in touch with us and leave feedback for the show. You can visit the website, geekcastradio.com, where you can comment on the episode and all of our different podcasts. You can rate our show on iTunes. Be sure to leave us feedback. Call the voicemail line, 502-526-5821. Please remember to tell us the show you were leaving the message for and your name. Become a fan of us on Facebook by searching Geekcast Radio Network. You can send us an email, feedback@geekcastradio.com. Follow us on Twitter @GeekcastRadio. So until next time, unleash the geek in you.